Mr. President, it's with mixed emotions that I stand today to honor my friend, my colleague, my mentor, the senior senator, the gentleman from Utah, Orrin Hatch. This year marks the end of an outstanding 42-year tenure serving the people of Utah in the United States Senate. In that time, Senator Hatch has made an indelible mark on our state, on the United States Senate, and on this nation. People who follow Washington politics closely know, of course, what he has meant to this institution, but also to his party, to his state, and to the Republic. But for those of us from Utah, Orrin Hatch is more than just a prominent name in the news. He's a towering political figure, not only of his generation, but also of the generations that have come along in his wake and that will follow. Many Utahns can't remember a time before Orrin Hatch was serving, leading, and speaking out for us in Washington. One of the great privileges of my young life was the opportunity to serve as his page when I was a teenager. He was, then as now, one of the leaders of the Senate. Not only a political role model, but a role model, period. Outspoken, but always thoughtful. Honest, always gentle. Tough when he had to be, and kind even when he didn't have to be. One of my fondest memories of Senator Hatch was something that occurred a couple of years after I was his page. I was maybe 18 years old or so. I was in Salt Lake City attending the semi-annual general conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Tabernacle at Temple Square. I happened to be sitting with my family, with my parents and siblings, just a row between Senator Hatch and his family. Toward the end of the meeting, it was time for Senator Hatch to catch his plane to go back to Washington, where he was representing our state so faithfully. When he turned around and saw me there, he stopped, recognizing me. He took the cufflinks right off of his shirt. They had the seal of the United States Senate on them, and he handed them to me as a gift. I felt like, and was in that moment, the luckiest kid in the world. I felt just like a rock star had handed me his guitar after a sold-out concert. That's how I felt at conference that day. But of course, the career of Orrin Hatch stretches back much further than that. In 1976, the political landscape of the United States was very different than it is today. We were plagued at that time with double-digit inflation, high interest rates, growing unemployment, and a diminishing military. America was still reeling from the war in Vietnam and from the Watergate scandal. At the same time, Congress was rapidly expanding the federal budget with little or no regard for the future debt it was racking up. Washington was governed by the belief that government was the answer to every problem and that ordinary Americans could not be trusted to make decisions by themselves. It was in this environment that Orrin Hatch, without any previous political experience, without having held previous political office, or according to experts, much chance of success, stepped up. And he stepped up in a very big way. As he wrote in one of his memoirs, quote, "I could not escape the powerful and persistent belief that my state and country were in serious trouble, headed down a dangerous and destructive path, and that if given a chance, I could make a difference. I felt it was my duty, my responsibility, to run and at least give voice to my concerns and my ideas for remedying what was wrong. It was my obligation to give the voters another choice," close quote. So Orrin, the son of a tradesman who grew up during the Great Depression in a ramshackle house built from recycled lumber, did just that. He defied the pundits, and he took the plunge. From his first campaign in 1976, Orrin understood that Utahns wanted the country to go in a different direction, and he was ready to offer his service and the full energy of his heart and devotion to that noble cause. Against all odds, And with a whole lot of work from Orrin, from his family, from his faithful band of supporters, Hatch beat the incumbent Democrat by a solid margin. Thus began his long and now famous career in the Senate and his many years of striving to serve the interests of Utah in the nation. For more than 4 decades, Orrin has not only been engaging in the great debates of his time, he's been leading them. As I see it, the thread that runs through Senator Hatch's politics is trust. His trust in the American people, his trust in the Constitution of the United States, his trust in this great institution that is the United States Senate. That trust of consumers, producers, workers, and families is why he's such an effective advocate for the free enterprise economy. It's why he sponsored a balanced budget amendment in to the U.S. Constitution some 17 times, and whence his nickname, Mr. Balanced Budget, from Ronald Reagan originated. In shepherding the historic tax reform law we passed last year, Senator Hatch adopted an inclusive, open-minded approach that succeeded specifically because he trusted his colleagues, because he invited them into the process, and he allowed them to make their own mark on that legislation. He trusted his colleagues, and it worked. His work in the 1980s, helping to create the modern generic drug industry, was based on the same principle, trusting the American people and the American economy to make good decisions for individuals, for families, and for their health care. We all know the honors and accolades. They include President pro tempore. They include being a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But Orrin would be the first to tell you the real legislative legacy that he leaves behind is the work of a senator who has sponsored more bills that have become law than any other lawmaker alive today. Look at the stamp he leaves on the Senate Judiciary Committee alone, for example. Not just landmark legislation, like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which guarantees robust protections for all Americans to live, work, and worship according to their beliefs. This legislation itself leaves behind a solid, proud legacy, one that will last for generations. Senator Hatch has also, just within the Senate Judiciary Committee alone, been involved in the selection and confirmation of federal judges, not just in Utah, but across the country. And every current member and many past members of the United States Supreme Court. That, too, is a legacy that will far outlast his time in the Senate, still by many, many decades. And yet, despite all the history Orrin has made in Washington, his story is even more impressive. He's been a loving and devoted husband to his wife, Elaine, for 61 years. Together they have 6 children, 23 grandchildren, and 24 great-grandchildren. They are his proudest achievements, and he credits their love as his key to success. Despite decades at the very pinnacle of American government, Orrin believes the most important years of his life were the 2 spent serving as a missionary in the Great Lakes mission of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As Senator Hatch mentioned in recent remarks, an article of our faith is that if there is anything virtuous, lovely, or of good report, or praiseworthy, we seek after these things. And this is indeed how Orrin Hatch has lived his life, and the way in which he has faithfully served God, family, his country, and his state. Utah and the United States of America as a whole are better off for his service since he decided to run for the Senate all those years ago. I'm grateful for all the time that he has dedicated to the state of Utah and for the personal encouragement he's given me. And from the time that I was his page to the past years that I've also been his colleagues in the United States Senate. It's been an honor to serve with him. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.